Please welcome Dean of the Argyros College of Business and Economics, Henrik Cronqvist.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Henrik Cronqvist, and I'm the Dean of the Argyros College of Business and Economics. And I'm super happy, thrilled to be here today to welcome all of you to Chapman University's Economic Forecast event. And I'm particularly excited to welcome our board members. Thank you for coming. Many of our alumni, business partners, supporters, students, families that are present here. And we also have about 4,000 people that have registered and that are participating on Zoom. So hello to everyone that is at home or at work as well. I would also like to start by thanking all of our sponsors. We cannot do this kind of event without our support from our amazing sponsors. And we have a fairly long list, so if you don't mind, please hold your applause, and we give one mega applause for everybody. The title sponsor today is City of Hope, Orange County. The platinum sponsor is Edwards Life Sciences. The gold sponsors are Julia and George Argyros, C&L Refrigeration, Christine and Bradley Comp, First American Financial, Schools First Federal Credit Union, and the silver sponsors are Real Estate Development Associates, the Ronald M. Simon Family Foundation, and Whittier Trust. The bronze sponsors that we would like to recognize are Orco, Block, and Hardscape, South Coast Investment Advisors, Yasai Properties. The patron sponsors are JP Morgan, Kaiser Permanente, the Morissette Family, PK Management, RC Hobbs Companies, and Wells Fargo. And the supporting sponsor is Bobby Cox. Our amazing media sponsors are Orange County Business Journal and the Orange County Register. So let's give them one big applause. Thank you. Thank you so much to our sponsors. And with these sponsors and guests, the economic forecast has raised over the years $5 million, and those money go to scholarships for our students so that they can pursue their education here at Chapman University. Now, the last couple of months, guys, here at Argyros have been a time of celebration. So there's been many things to celebrate and to be thankful for. The biggest one was in September. Several of you were here then, and that's when we renamed from the Argyros School to the Argyros College, which we are now, and that was thanks to a $10 million gift from Ambassador George Argyros and his family. And this generous gift provides an umbrella under which we now have schools that are dedicated to scholarship and teaching in certain areas. And at this point, we have one school, in this amazing school called the Burra School of Accounting and Finance, which we started thanks to a $5 million gift from Jim and Kay Burra. So let's give a round of applause to the Argyros families and the Burra family. Thank you. Another thing that we're celebrating is a $1 million gift that we received from Board of Trustee Chairman Emeritus, the amazing Doi Henley, who I can see sitting right there in the first row. Thank you, Doi. And this funding we will use for strategic innovation initiatives, and that means that we will support innovative research for our faculty and also help our students to accelerate their careers. And a few more developments. We have a lot of things going on at the Argyros College, so I would like to recognize a couple of different highlights over the last couple of months. One being the leadership lecture series that we kicked off thanks to Magic Johnson right here on the scene, and that was pretty cool. We have also reignited our Leatherby Center for Entrepreneurship and Business Ethics, and we were awarded a $1 million grant from the state of California recently. And we have also started a new podcast series, and in this, which you can go to Apple or Spotify and download, we're featuring some of our up-and-coming alumni that are doing amazing work, and we have many of them, so we're really excited about that. Now, before we hear from our experts here about the economy, I would like to take a moment to thank our top employers of 2023. And we have the logos up here of those that are partnering with Chapman to hire our students. And these employers, they think Chapman first. And one of the key ways to think Chapman first is to turn to Chapman for your recruitment needs. So all of those companies that are represented here, when you're looking for talent, then you should think Chapman first and come to us and source your talent. Now, what's going on with the economy, guys? So a lot of things happening today, yesterday, and we've had many developments in 2023. We've had gas prices that have gone up. We've had interest rates that have gone up. We've had a housing market that is complex, and we have many different world and events in this country. So what does all of this mean for 2024 looking forward? Well, the obvious place is obviously to be here to the economic forecast and learn about this from our President Emeritus, Dr. Jim Doti, from Dr. Raymond Sfer, and also from Professor Fadel Lawandi. Now, before they come on board, I would like to familiarize you with our title sponsor a little bit more. That's, of course, City of Hope, Orange County. They have been an amazing partner for the forecast and for the university. So please join me in welcoming the President of City of Hope, Orange County, and also Chapman Board of Trustee member, Annette Walker.
Thank you, Dean Cronqvist. And thank you, Dr. Doti and the Argyros College of Business and Economics for the opportunity to sponsor today's event. You know, we deeply value our partnership and are looking forward to the insights and information that are going to be shared today. As a strategist who is always trying to make educated guesses about the future, I personally look forward to hearing the projections, and then, of course, I run home and have my husband check all our investments. As an employer and a resident of Orange County, the forecast always provides perspective and context that enable us to plan and position our organization for optimal performance. You know, now that City of Hope is a citizen of Orange County, we are always striving to bring value to this amazing community. City of Hope is one of the top 10 comprehensive cancer centers in the United States. So whether it is our scientific contributions that are setting the pace for cancer prevention, treatment, and cures, or providing the most advanced cancer treatment centers and facilities in the county, or in the words of one of my favorite physicians, Dr. Steve Foreman, taking a patient's hand, because when we take a patient's hand, we never let go. You see, Orange County, City of Hope is here for you. Just 1 year ago, we opened the City of Hope Lennar Foundation Cancer Center, and today I am proud to say that Orange County's only hospital that will be 100% dedicated to cancer care is about half done and scheduled to open in 2025. I sincerely hope that you never need us, but in the event that you do, or someone you love does, please don't hesitate to call. Now, I'd like to leave you with a very short video that shows the progress we are making on the hospital and why City of Hope is so valuable to our community. Thank you.
Today marks the topping off, which is the placement of the last beam. We're here to acknowledge, honor, and thank the people who don't always get the spotlight, our construction crews, who I so admire.
City of Hope's vision is being realized, and I stand with every contributor to declare our pride in being part of it. When we all gather to raise the beam today, we are letting everyone know that hope lives here in Orange County.
I build hope because I believe in the power of spaces that mend both body and spirit.
I build hope for my brother-in-law, Nico. Nico is now cancer-free thanks to the care he received at City of Hope.
I build hope in honor of those who have fought the hardest battles in their lives, and the family and friends who have been with them every step of the way.
You can't fully appreciate how important this is until you
or someone you love needs the care it provides. But knowing this facility, filled with hope and people who care, is right here will help them get through those difficult times.
You know, I've been doing this a long time, and I can tell you hospital jobs are one of the toughest jobs you'll ever do. They're hard to permit, they're hard to inspect, and they're really, really hard to build. But I can also tell you at the end of the day, when the dust settles and that first patient goes through the door, it is one of the most amazing feelings that you'll have.
This hospital, in conjunction with the adjacent cancer center, will not only transform our lives today, but will also carve an enduring legacy of health and well-being for generations to come.
Please welcome Chapman University President Daniele Strupa.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you, City of Hope, Orange County, for sponsoring the forecast as title sponsor. And good afternoon to everybody. It's kind of hard to believe this year marked the 46th years of the economic forecast. In 1978, the Gary Anderson Center for Economic Research was founded, and the center inaugural forecast was the first economic forecast in the US to be based on an urban econometric model. Chapman University forecasting has consistently outperformed agencies and institutions participating in the Blue Chip Economic Indicators Survey. Before we get to the actual forecast, as many of you know, we have been announcing a gift of Chapman every month since we launched the public phase of our campaign. And this afternoon, we will announce the 10th gift of Chapman. And to do so, I would like to invite Chapman University trustees and economic forecast sponsor, Rick Muth, and Chapman University Executive Vice President and Chief Advancement Officer, Matt Parlow, to join me on the stage. Rick is an alum of Chapman, earning his MBA in 1981. He's the president, CEO of Orco Block and Hardscape, a family-owned business here in Orange County where he has worked for 48 years. Rick joined Chapman Board of Trustees in 2017 and has been a longtime partner of the university. In particular, Rick has been a strong supporter of the economic forecast and has helped found and promote the Chapman University Inland Empire Economic Forecast. Rick is a great friend and alum of Chapman, and I'm so pleased to announce that today he and his family have given a very generous gift to establish a chair in economics in the Argyros College of Business and Economics. Thank you, Rick, for your incredible generosity and for establishing this important chair that will help us achieve the goal of becoming one of the top 50 business schools in the country. Before I go, I would like to invite President Emeritus Jim Doti to join us on the stage.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And I would like to say a couple of words about Jim. He's been described as a Renaissance man, and that's only the tip of the iceberg. He has completed over 60 marathons and climbed 5 of the world's 7 summits. He's a recipient of the Horatio Alger Award and the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, and his work has appeared in countless academic journals and periodicals. Most notably, he has served as Chapman University president for 25 years, and there is nowhere on this campus that hasn't been touched by his vision and his leadership. Jim, Chapman would really not be what it is now without all of your work. You worked tirelessly to help make this great university what it is today, and you continue to do so to inspire all of us. That inspiration includes, of course, your teaching in the classroom, and in particular, the impact you had on a young Rick Muth more than 4 decades ago when you taught him in the MBA program. That's how important a good teacher can be. And it is in that spirit that it gives me great pleasure to announce that Dr. Jim Doti will be the first holder of the Rick Muth Family Chair in Economics. Now I would like to ask Rick to say a few words.
I promise you to say a few words, okay?
All right.
But there'll be few words, but they're very special to me. Now, Dr. Doti and Jim, this is a very special day, and so glad to be part of this. And, you know, walking down memory lane, I remember, gosh, you started the Walmart Theater. I was there too, wasn't I, to watch this. So anyhow, we're in this wonderful venue, and we got all these people here. And Chapman now they went from just learning something, you and your team, now at the top of the forecast world. I mean, it's just been great to be part of this, but it's also such a delight to give the Rick Muth Family Chair in Family Business. So, and you found time to keep giving the forecast like you're going to do in a few minutes. And when you were a great president for 25 years in the NIPAR forecast, we're about to have the 32nd year on that. Yeah. And so I got to tell you, it's just such a pleasure. You're the first person in the Rick Muth Family Chair in Economics. And this forecast, I got to tell you, I know a lot of people here, like me, is going to sit on the edge of my seat, just waiting to hear something, how things are going to be. And I could tell you that when we're finished, I'm going to meet my staff at Oracle Block. We're going to talk to our different customers about it. And I got to tell you one more thing is that when I go to different states, people that are in my industry, and I say, who do you use for a forecast? How do you get what the percentage inflation is going to be and CPI and all that? And they ain't so lucky as me. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now, without further ado, I'd love to introduce to you the Rick Muth Family Chair in Economics, Dr. Jim Doti.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Thank you. My wife Lynn and I were watching California Go last night, and Hulhauser, great friend of Chapman, was doing a tour of the Back Bay, and there was a feature story on the Muth Scientific Research Center that's part of the Back Bay. So Rick has carried on the great Muth family tradition. It'll be an honor to serve as the inaugural Muth Chair. Thank you so much. Well, it's great to be back here. Before we proceed, I want to thank Mary Bell Musco for her vision, her beloved husband's vision, Paul, for making it possible to present this forecast, the most incredible, beautiful performing arts center in higher education. Mary Bell, please stand up and receive our grateful recognition. Thank you, Mary Bell. Well, I want to bring, before we get into the forecast, some people have asked, how did I do this year in the Napa-Sonoma half marathon? Now, just some of you are new, so let me just retrace. Last year, December, I reported very excitedly that I came in #1 in my age bracket, the old codger 75 to 79 group. And I was really excited about that until a week later, I checked the race results that came out, and I realized that, as you can see here, I was the only one in that age division. That's diminished some of the excitement. So I started getting email blasts late last year to sign up for this year's Napa-Sonoma race. And so I sent an email back to the race director, and I said, I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't a whole lot of competition. And he came right back and said, this next year it's going to be bigger and better. We guarantee there's going to be competition for you next year. So I signed up, and I'm pleased to announce that in spite of having competition this year in July, I still came in #1 for the second year. Here are the results. As you can see, I handily beat this John Bodine by half an hour. When you check his time, it looks like he may have walked the course, but nonetheless, this year I came in with competition, and I'm going to sign up next year or in July, no matter what, because I'm going for a three-peat. I am planning to build a Doti dynasty in Napa, Sonoma. There I am. Nice thing about the race, nice thing is you even get a bottle of wine if you win, so it's kind of a nice feature. Okay, getting to the U.S. forecast. I know why most of you are here. Don't kid me now. You're here to see me squirm and somehow get out of our forecast, which wasn't, it was pretty telling. I mean, we didn't mince words. We said there was going to be a recession right now, late this year. I don't see any recession. Do you see a recession? No recession. What happened? Now, remember what I said last year. If this were to happen, blame it on Fidel. It's all his fault. Well, I decided that we're a team, we're in it together, and I need to explain what went wrong, not to make excuses, because the reason we went wrong has implications for our forecast that we'll be presenting this afternoon. What happened? Let's see the magnitude of our error. We forecasted from 22 to 23 that the economy on average would drop by 0.4%. It actually increased by 2.4%. In actual dollars, instead of dropping $87 billion, the economy grew by 523. So all told, that's a swing of $610 billion more spending than what we forecasted. That's 0.6 of $1 trillion. That's a pretty big matzo ball hanging out there. What explains it? How do we get out of this one? Well, let me bring you back to your principles of economics, specifically macro theory. You may recall something called Keynesian economics, which is basically the theory of John Maynard Keynes, who wrote his general theory right around the same time we were experiencing the Great Depression, and basically said to get out of this global depression, governments have to spend more than they are taking in taxation. And again, this is history. He actually met with FDR, and FDR wouldn't go along with it. He was pretty much conservative at heart, didn't want to run up a big deficit. And it wasn't until World War II when we really had Keynesian fiscal policy and the kind of spending that Keynes wanted that we ultimately got out of the Great Depression. So when you look at fiscal policy, a great measure is the deficit, which is basically the difference between spending and taxation. And the greater the deficit, the more fiscal stimulus. Well, let's look at what kind of stimulus we had last year. Back in about this time last year, the early estimate for the 22-23 deficit runs October to October, it would be a deficit of $900 billion. Generally, that would be a very high deficit historically. In mid-year, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, revised that to $1,200 billion, $1.2 trillion. But we didn't believe them. We said it's going to be even worse than what the CBO is saying. This was at our update forecast. You may recall we said it's going to be $1,400 billion, $200 billion more than what the CBO is saying. Right now, looking back, what actually happened? $2,000 billion, $2 trillion deficit. And that means that it went up from what we were saying in June, 1,400 to 2,000. It was $600 billion more spending, fiscal stimulus, which is almost exactly the amount that we're off. As big as that number is, it can be explained by that. Now, okay, Keynesian policy certainly works in the short run, but there's a longer run component. You could stimulate in the short run, like taking an energy pill, But then there's withdrawal symptoms, because that $600 billion has to be financed. The government has to borrow that. And they do that by selling bonds to you and I, the public, and also the Fed. Usually the Fed is a big player. That's what they call monetizing the debt, where the Fed will go in and buy enough bonds to keep interest rates where they are. This year, the Federal Reserve is doing the exact opposite. Not buying bonds, they're selling bonds to tighten the money supply to fight the fight against inflation. So rather than cooperating with the Treasury, they're, in a sense, increasing the supply even more, putting more pressure on financial markets. So the only people left to buy bonds are the public. There's only so many of them, which means that the net result is higher interest rates. More bonds, fewer buyers, the Fed's not buying, prices go up, and as a result, prices go down, and as a result, interest rates increase. And that's what we're experiencing here. 10-year bond, 30-year mortgage rate. The dotted line is our forecast. Notice we're thinking, in spite of some short-term transitory reduction that we've had the last month, we're forecasting that the 30-year and 10-year bond will stay about the same, maybe a little upward pressure and then a little downward pressure by the end of the year, but they're going to be staying higher than what we had back in the days when the 10-year rate was 1.5 and the longer-term rate was just a little bit over that. We really believe, at least for the next couple of years, there's a new norm. Interest rates are going to stay elevated, and Ramon Sphere will have more to say later about the long-run impact of the kinds of deficits that we are incurring. Obviously, higher interest rates have a price. That's the withdrawal that I'm talking about. You have home sales down by something like 32%, staying down, which is our forecast for 24. Job growth, you look at these monthlies, a much better figure, consistent figures to look at the quarterly rates on a year-to-year percentage rate basis. And as you can see, it's been declining since the beginning of 22, and we believe that decline is going to continue into 24, through 23 and into 24. Now, there are more variables than that. There are a number of variables that go into our model, but to cut through it all and get right to real GDP, which is the aggregate of all spending that's going on. That's where you determine the health and well-being of the economy. We see real GDP from that 5% we had in the third quarter, weaker fourth quarter, and we believe negative growth the first quarter of next year, and then a recovery. This is, by the way, this would skirt a recession. If it actually comes out this way, it would be a very weak year, but a non-recessionary year. Recession would usually entail 2 quarters back-to-back negative changes in real GDP. Forecasting has never been as difficult as it's been the last year, 2 years, because the magnitude of the swings of government spending, fiscal policy, been unlike anything we've had since we began forecasting 46 years ago. I mean, look at the surplus or deficit up until 2000. It hasn't been really until the Great Recession, but more recently, the COVID recession, that we've had $3 trillion deficits. And then when we go into recovery, when we're no longer in recession, when theoretically you no longer need that kind of fiscal stimulus, we're getting $2 trillion deficits. There's the deficit. This is where we thought it'd be here, went here, and it changed the forecast from a recession to a moderate year of growth. So, these swings are, the magnitude of those swings is so great, it's very difficult to forecast, because what's going to happen, and that's the question mark, what's going to happen in 24? Now, the White House is saying the deficit will be somewhere around 1.8 trillion, close to where it is now. But it could be more. We can see the mistakes that happened last year, or the changes that happened. Could be less. Maybe revenues come in, maybe the Republican Party will be more successful in limiting spending. We don't know, but those swings could be $300, $400, $500 billion. It's not going to take much of a fiscal reduction to change that negative change to a recession, maybe a mild recession rather than just a weak economy. But you have to come down somewhere with a forecast. And right now, when you look at it, we're looking at 24 at 1.2% growth, half of about what we got this year in terms of growth. Not a recession, but a very weak economy. But we're not out of the woods, and I'm not ready to bet on a soft landing just yet, although the chances of that are much greater than they were before because of the continuing fiscal stimulus that we are getting. This is that spread that invariably, when it becomes negative, when the short-term interest rate, like the federal funds, increases to the point where it's greater than the long-term rate, we've had a recession without fail. You can see that every time it goes negative, a recession follows. Not immediately, with a lag. Let's take our microscope here and look at the first of those recessions right there and magnify it and see what was going on. As you can see, the spread turned negative in early '68 and became even more negative, and then that gray area is the recession, defined as the recessionary period by the National Bureau of Economic Research. And then a recession occurred, and that lag between the time it went negative and the recession started, 7 quarters. So there's a long lag there. Okay, we looked at not just that recession, we looked at every one. As you can see, there's the 7-quarter one we just talked about. The next recession, the lag was 4, then 6, and so on. And the average of every recession that we've had before the negative turned into a recession was 5.4 quarters. If you take the 5.4 quarters and figure out where will it hit if it just is on average, as you can see, it turned negative late last year. And if you take 5 quarters as an average, that would bring you to 24.1 before the normal beginning or start of a recession. And that's the very quarter that we had, that we're forecasting negative growth. So it wouldn't take much to change the forecast scenario. What about on the price side? Long-run inflation, we've already said, the Friedman dictum, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. And just to look at the history here, when M2 was increasing at a 25% rate with a lagged effect, that's when we said inflation is going to be spiraling upwards rapidly. And this is, on this side, measures the inflation. It hit 5.6, that's the core. And then the money supply started dropping. It's dropping because not the federal funds rate, but what I showed you before where the Federal Reserve is basically selling bonds or retiring bonds, but they're basically placing constraint every month, basically selling $70 billion on average every month, reducing M2 and squeezing inflation. And that's why, as you can see, inflation is dropping, and we're forecasting that's going to continue so that by the end of the next year, the core will be at 3.2%. This has led the Federal Reserve Board just yesterday to announce that the interest rate, federal funds rate increases come to an end, and in all likelihood there will be rate cuts this next year. Now, our review that you have went to press about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, and we anticipated those increases. In fact, if you look at the review, we're anticipating, even back then, 3 weeks ago, that the federal funds rate would drop 3 times in 2024. And that's kind of what the Fed hinted at. actually more important that they didn't say anything about, is what they're going to be doing on this bond buyback program. Are they going to continue to be tight there, or are they going to join in helping the Treasury sell all that debt? It's a very important question we don't have any information on. Given those federal funds rate cutbacks, you would think normally, well, we're out of the woods. The Fed's reducing interest rates, going to be a soft landing, interest rates are lower, things are going to get better. But in fact, a declining federal funds rate is usually a bad sign. After the Fed increases the federal funds, they usually don't start decreasing until they see signs of weakness. As shown here, every recession that we talked about, every recession, the federal funds rate was increasing during the recession, not decreasing. Every one, there's 4, and there are 3 more. So with that, I would not say we're out of the woods. The spread is still pointing negatively, and dropping the federal funds rate is not going to ensure that we're in a soft landing. I think the best we can say right now is it's going to be a weak economy, and possibly even a recessionary one. But the best guess right now is a weak economy. But the long-run effects of the policies that have been followed in terms of these massive deficits, unprecedented deficits, piling up debt, and the long-run impact is very significant. And we thought it would be instructive to get into that in a little more detail. So I'd like to have Ramon Sphere, the director of our Center for Economic Research, to tell us a little bit more about the long-run effects of the deficits that we're incurring. Ramon?
Innovation starts with inspiration, and we're inspired. We're Edwards Life Sciences, driven by a passion to help patients live longer, healthier, and more productive lives.
Thank you to Edwards Life Sciences. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The United States has had federal deficits for a very, very long time. At the end of the Clinton administration, we had 3 years of surpluses, 3 consecutive years. Those were followed by 1 year of a surplus during the George W. Bush administration. Then President Bush decreased the tax rates and taxes in general. And he sold it to the public by saying that if you cut tax rate, you would stimulate the economy. The stimulation of the economy will increase output and people's income, and if income increases, the government will collect more taxes, more than the decrease in the amount of taxes due to the lower tax rates. Well, his father a few years back called that voodoo economics. And it came out to be true, because the second year of his presidency, we ended up with a deficit, and we have had deficits since 2002. That's for 22 consecutive years. Then came Mr. Trump. He also decreased taxes, and he sold it to the public that if you decrease taxes, you will end up collecting more in taxes because of stimulating the economy. Well, we ended up with a $1 trillion deficit at a time when the economy was growing at a very high rate, and the unemployment rate was 3.5%, the lowest in 50 years. So, what were all these deficits, and what do we expect them to be in the future? The deficit was around $1.4 trillion in 2022. It went up to $1.7 trillion in 2023. Actually, one should be lower than 1.4, and the other one should be higher than 1.4 because of what the Biden administration did with student loans. But the sum is correct, okay? We expect the deficit to reach over $2.8 trillion in 2033. Okay, so that's an increase of almost 100%, okay? The public debt. If the deficits are going to increase, then obviously our debt is going to increase as well because we keep adding to it. These numbers are for the public debt. That is the debt that is owned by individuals, by corporations, by trust funds, by mutual funds, and by international government and international organizations. It amounted to $24 trillion in 2022. This figure excludes what we call intergovernmental agencies debt. That is the debt that the federal government owes to government agencies such that the Social Security Administration, the Medicare Administration, pension funds, government pension funds, etc. The debt is expected to reach over $47 trillion 11 years from now, or 10 years from now. So that's an increase of 95%. In other words, it is going to double in around 11 years. But some argue that what's important is not the amount of the public debt, but what percent is it related to the gross domestic product, the value of everything that we produce every year. In 2022, that percentage was around 96% of GDP. Somewhere in 2025, that percent is going to be 100. In other words, the debt is going to be equal to GDP somewhere in the middle of 2025. By 2032, it would reach 116% of GDP, so 16% higher. If you were to add the government agencies debt, that percentage will end up at 130 instead of 116. Mind you, that President Biden wanted to cut the deficit, so he decided to forgive $132 billion in student loans. Well, obviously, he was not an accounting major because as a result, he really is making the deficit even worse than before. Notice also that when you talk about the debt, the intergovernmental debt is going to decrease between now and 2033. The reason is the government agencies are going to have to sell some of the bonds that they have in order to finance whatever they want to spend. The Social Security Administration is already doing that because they collect less money than what they distribute to the retirees. And others are going to start doing the same, like pension funds and Medicare. So that number now is around $7 billion is going to shrink in 2033 to around $5.6 trillion. So while the public debt keeps increasing more and more, the intergovernmental debt is going to actually shrink. Interest rate on the debt. The CBO estimated that in 2022, the interest on the debt was 2.1%. They estimate that it will be around 3.2% in 2033. So if the deficit is increasing, the interest on the debt is going to increase, obviously. But that's a double whammy. The interest rate itself is going to go up, pushing the interest rate payments even higher. So how much would it be in 2023? In 2022, the amount was $478 billion. It's expected to reach over $1.4 trillion in 2033. So this is more than 208% increase in 11 years. So in 2023, the interest payment will be 3 times higher than what they were in 2022. So again, if we take that amount and divide it by how much the government spends, the outlays by the federal government, in 2022, the interest was 7.6% of the total expenditures by the government. That percentage is going to increase to 14.8% in 2033. So that's a double of the percentage. So how can the government pay such a large percentage out of their outlays to interest alone? Well, they cannot decrease payments in Social Security because that's a set amount unless we change the laws. Unlikely, there will not be a decrease in how much we spend on defense, which is around 10% these days. So if we keep it over time, then what are all the difference between 7.6 and 14.8 going to come from? Basically from spending on infrastructure and spending on investments in general, unfortunately. What does the future hold? What are the steps that the government can take, not that they're going to do that, in order to decrease the deficit and hence not allow the total debt to increase at such a dramatic percentage? The first possibility is to increase taxes. The decrease in taxes by the Trump administration will no longer be effective in 2025. So Congress needs to renew those decreases. If they don't, then that will help the deficit, obviously. There is talk by the Democrats that they want to impose taxes on wealth and on profits that have not been already accrued. That case, there is a case now under the Supreme Court in order to consider whether they would allow the federal government to tax the wealth of people as opposed to taxing their income. Another possibility is to increase the taxes for Social Security instead of being only, and Medicare, 7.62% to push it higher. That's another possibility. If not increasing taxes, how about decreasing spending? Well, what is it going to come from? Social Security is one. Maybe they do not have to increase Social Security payments every year by the consumer price index rises. So they could do it at a lower rate. They could cut infrastructure expenditures. They could cut defense. But really, the cut in spending is somehow limited, unless if you really attack the Social Security and other payments similar to that. If the Treasury, because of those huge deficits, is going to issue larger and larger amount of bonds, some of it in order to, for the bonds that are maturing in order to replace them, and the rest for the new deficits. If they are going to do that, how much interest are they going to pay? There are already this gambling in the market for bonds that investors are saying, how reliable is it to keep buying more and more bonds? Internationally, China used to hold $1.1 trillion in American bonds. They cut that number the last couple of years to a little over $1.8 trillion. Interest rates in Japan are going to start going up, which means the Japanese will buy less bonds over time because they are also a big buyer of our bonds. So the rest, it looks like it, is going to be bought right here in the United States locally. Certainly, the Treasury can always sell the bonds that it has. All it has to do is increase interest rates. It will attract more buyers for the bonds. Okay? And if they have an auction, then there will be no problem in selling what they have. So one major result then of the deficits and the higher debt is that it will lead to higher interest rate than otherwise would have been the case. And lastly, if the Treasury does not increase interest rates to be able to sell everything it wants, then the buyer of last resort is the Federal Reserve. It did it 3 years ago and 2 years ago because of the recession. They could go back and purchase more and more bonds and increase their balance that they have, but that means most likely higher inflation rate. So unfortunately, there will be in our future either higher interest rates than otherwise would have been the case, or higher inflation rate, or both. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for supporting our students. Thank you. Here's Jim to present the California forecast.
Thank you, Ramon.
Yep.
Well, you know, the holiday season is supposed to be a time of good cheer and good tidings. After that depressing news, I think we're all ready to leave the country. And I wish I could, in California, be the bearer of good tidings and good news, but as you'll hear in just a few minutes, not so. Let's look at California over a little longer period, and you could see that compared to the U.S. During the recession, probably for good reason because of the tighter stringency policy relating to COVID, we suffered more job loss. We came back in 21.3 greater, and then more recently, it's been following the U.S. except because of the scale here, you can't see this, but that's California is growing like a couple of percentage points less than the U.S. And to give this a better perspective, what we did was to look at every state's job growth in the most recent period that we could find, namely 2022 to March of 2023. And we ranked all the states in terms of percentage growth in jobs. And as you can see, the top three, 1, 2, and 3, Texas, Florida, and Nevada. It's not a coincidence that those 3 states are also no state income tax states. And then the bottom 3, Oregon, California, and Iowa, are tied, 49th and 50th, the lowest job growth in the union. Actually, Iowa has the foresight to do something about it. They are drastically now cutting their corporate income tax, and they are considering eliminating its state income tax entirely. California, nothing. There was an article that Jerry Parsky and Tom Campbell and I wrote, it's in your review, and it was just a proposal for the legislature to ask the Department of Finance to look into the possibility that if we reduce taxes across the board, maybe, just maybe, during the Kennedy tax cuts, it might increase revenues. Nobody would bite on it. No legislator would touch it with a 10-foot pole. Very important indicator for the overall prosperity of the state is what's going on in what we call advanced industries. We at Chapman, in partnership with UCI, Ken Murphy specifically, we have kept now and put together probably the most complete database on advanced industries. These are industries that on average pay the workers 2 to 3 times the statewide or average in that metropolitan statistical area. And we track it for 50 different MSAs, including Orange County. This shows you the percentage of advanced jobs. This is extremely important because to a great extent, California and Sacramento has relied on the Silicon Valley in terms of tax revenues. And when you take the Silicon Valley along with Sacramento, LA, Orange County, Inland Empire, you see that we started in 2005 as a percent of the nation with about 19% of all of the advanced jobs in the nation California had 19%. Then we had a period where it grew, then dropped, long-term period of growth, and then decline. But here we are, almost 20 years later, and back where we started at around 19%. So we thought maybe it would be interesting. What's going on in those MSAs that are in low tax states? So we took the states, the 15 lowest tax states as measured by the Tax Foundation. There's all state and local taxes. And pick out the MSAs in those states and look at the growth in these particular MSAs. You could see Texas, Florida, Washington, Utah. A lot of these are no income tax states. And look and see what's happened to the percentage of jobs in those MSAs. And if you aggregate them all, those 15 MSAs, it has grown over time from 25 to about 31%, 5.5%, while California is flat. What's going on? You know, what's happening here? It's people are moving out of the state, and we'll get into why in just a moment. You don't have to look very far given the evidence I've already given you, but this shows you on a June-to-June basis how many people have migrated out of the state. That is the net difference between people moving out and those moving in. If it's negative, as it is in California, on net basis, more people are leaving the state. Just in the last 4 years, 19, 20, 21, and 22, we've lost 1.2 million people. What does that mean in the long run? Well, first of all, it's finally attracting the attention of the Department of Finance. I think Sacramento as well, and there's evidence for that. If you look at California population projections from the Department of Finance, up until 6 months ago, you would think they didn't know anything about the people leaving California, which they should be looking at because population includes these kinds of domestic interstate flows of people. There's the original forecast. 6 months ago, they revised it. That's the lower revised figure. And the reason I believe they are finally taking into account the net outflow is because if you look at 22, the difference is 1.1 million, almost exactly the outflow during that period of time. Overall, I think they're probably still overly optimistic on the revised. Nonetheless, the difference between the original forecast 6 months ago and what they're saying now, in not too long, something like 7 years, that's 2.5 million people difference. 2.5 million. That's roughly the population of the state of population of Chicago. That just lowered. Just think of the impact it will have on businesses, prosperity, the economy, and you'll get some of that right here. First of all, we're finding that the people leaving, looking at IRS data, are higher income people, not lower. We thought, before we got this IRS data, that these are comprised mainly of blue-collar workers following where the jobs are being created. They're lower income people. Turns out it's the higher income people leaving. In 2017, of the lost AGI, that's adjusted gross income. That's what we pay our tax. You have your gross income, the deductions, you're left with the amount that's left over in AGI that you pay taxes on. And in 2017, 41% of those were making $200,000 or more. By 2021, it's almost 70%. So it's higher income people leaving, and that's why, as you can see here, personal income taxes are finally beginning to take a hit. COVID played some games, and it was difficult to see what was going on, but it's coming home to roost. People leaving, it's having a negative impact on revenues, $26 billion, a decline in just 1 year. That's huge. And that's leading to this budget deficit that was just recently announced, I think a week ago, that the state is facing a $68 billion deficit. I think that's probably conservative. It will be greater than that. That means between now and the next budgetary year for 24-25, there's somehow the governor's going to have to find in the budget reducing that amount of money, either in increased taxes or reduced expenditures. What's happening? Why is that the case? Let's look at what's going on with AGI here. Here's the cumulative impact on migratory income. And what I want to do here is to show that it's taxes is the explanation for these domestic outflows. And it's not only counting number of people, but the income flows. So now we're looking not just at people, we're looking at how much AGI is leaving the state versus those people bringing AGI into the state. And if you rank our 50 states by tax, income tax, not state and local taxes total, but income tax, the lowest tax states were able, on a net basis, to bring in $390 billion extra. More came in than left over this 17 to 21 period. And look, at every time you move the income tax rank, it drops until California, of course, is in that last total. The loss is $446 billion. That's why Jerry Parsky, Tom Campbell, and I, that's why we argued maybe reducing taxes like is doing now will have a positive impact on revenue because it might lessen this outflow that's going on. Okay, now let's say you ask the governor, why is this happening? I've got a quote here. It's not me saying it, it's the governor. This is a response similar to what he said in response to the same question in his debate with Governor DeSantis, Ron DeSantis. And I'm going to read this because if you could make more sense out of this than I can, all the power to you. But this is to a Washington Examiner, and it's quoting him. Why are so many people leaving the state? The governor says, many factors. And there's been two deep analyses that drives the number one factor. Newsom said, appearing a bit annoyed at the question, the vast majority, almost the entire amount, impacted because of visa policies in the Trump administration. I'll ignore the fact that that's a run-on sentence, but let's go on. Our formula for success is getting first-round draft choices from the rest of the world. I mean, we're as dumb as we want to be. What in the world does that mean? I mean, really, what does it... First of all, to go back to Trump and talk about visa policies relate to international migration. It has nothing to do with state to state. But what do visa policies have to do whether people are moving to Texas and Florida? And then to talk about, what is it, first-round draft choices from... I have no idea what he's talking about. And then we're as dumb as we want to be. I know, the last couple of years I've been hard on the governor. No question. And maybe I'm being paranoid, but I think he has it in for me. Again, I may be paranoid, but I think he has a contract out for me. And let me explain to give you the evidence. About a month ago, I get in the mail that I have to go in for a driver's exam, the written driver's exam. I haven't had one of those in a long time. I get this. And I study up, I take all the exams and go online, get some exams. I felt I was ready. So I go in. And you know how horrible an experience that is, but I go in. This was much more horrible than the usual. I'm not going to give you all the details. Let me, the more salient aspects. I go to the window where you have to take an eye test. Okay, this is the honest-to-goodness truth. I'm not exaggerating. This is exactly what happened. I know it sounds like a Marx Brothers film, but this is what happened. The woman behind the acrylic, separation said, okay, read the eye chart right in back of me over there. I look. What eye chart? Just read the first line, sir. I can't see the eye chart. I literally cannot see the eye chart. And she asked me again. I said, I'm sorry, I can't. And she gives me one of these. I don't know what they call that, but I think it's showing disdain for me. I had to take a separate kind of exam. As I found this somewhat disconcerting. I passed the other exam, and then I go in to take the exam itself. So I start the exam, and if you haven't done this, you put in your name, social security number. Then they ask for a thumbprint. And there's a little rectangle on the screen for the thumbprint. So I take my thumb and I'm pushing my thumb and nothing's happening and pressing different. And there's a floor walker walking around, and I think he's there to deal with imbeciles like me because he says, "Sir, can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, this thumb, it's not taking my thumbprint." And he said, "Sir, you don't press the screen on the computer. There's a pad here you press for." There was a little rectangle. You know, why they show the rectangle if you don't press? Anyway, okay, so that may have gotten me a little charged up. And so then I take the exam after all that. And I'm taking the exam, and then all of a sudden comes out, "Sorry, you failed the exam. Go to window 4. I have to tell you, I think, going back in my life, I don't think I've ever failed an exam. Really, I don't think I ever failed an exam until that moment. I'm in a kind of stupor, in a daze. I'm not moving, I'm just looking at the screen. I failed this exam. The floor walker comes along, comes back, says, "Sir, they need the terminal, so you're going to have to walk over. There's a line there. Those are for the people who failed the exam." So he gets me, and I kind of hobble over there. I'm still in a daze, and there I am, standing in a long line with a bunch of other losers. It was like the worst experience. And now, getting back to the governor, I studied these exams. Those questions that I had to answer were not on any of the exams that I covered. None of them. Okay, here's a typical question. If you punch out a construction worker on the freeway, is that a 12-month sentence, an 18-month sentence, or a 2-year jail prison time? I mean, come on. First of all, you're on a freeway, you're going to stop and punch out a construction worker? How many times is that going to happen? Anyway, I think he's got it in for me, and I thought to myself, how am I going to get out of this? Maybe I could say something nice about the governor so I could get out of this fatwa that he's got out for me. And I thought, well, what can I say good? And I can't think of anything. I'm sorry. Okay. Now, some of you may be saying, you know, all this thing Doti's saying about people moving out of the state, let them go. Let them go to Florida, deal with the bugs. Go to Texas, deal with the humidity. Las Vegas, the intense heat. And we're left in this beautiful state, wonderful state with the ocean, the beaches, the mountains, all of that. Less congestion. So let them go. It's more of California that we can enjoy. The problem with that, as you can see here, if you're an economist and you look at what's good for the economy, is growth in per capita income. As you can see, this is something that we did here at the center. We looked at population change from 2010 to 20, ranked it, the highest population changes all the way to the lowest. And as you can see, the greater the population change, the greater the growth in per capita income. Not surprisingly, California is in that last group. Okay, what about total residential permits? Getting into the construction side, we are forecasting 102,000 permits. Remember, the governor wanted 500,000 a year, then 300,000. 102,000, that might seem, well, it's temporary. Mortgage rates are high. Construction industry is in a recession. Maybe a depression, and they're going to go back up to higher levels, and maybe even to that 300,000 that the governor touts as our goal. In fact, there's an article in your review that basically argues that's probably a high water mark, and it's going to be even lower than that. Think of it this way. 1.2 million people leaving the state. Let's translate that into homes. There are, in California, on average, 2.67 people per household unit. So all you have to do is take the 1.2 million, divide it by 2.67, and that means 450,000 homes are released for everybody else. So in addition to the supply, the new supply, permits, there are homes that are being vacated by those leaving the state that are now available. So you're talking about 450,000. It's like 4 years of supply that's being dumped on the marketplace. And we see, if you read that article, significantly lower permits in the year. And this is something I'll be talking about in Orange County in a bit. Median home price, mortgage rates, what's going to happen to prices? Well, you can see going back historically, there's an inverse relationship, not surprisingly, between mortgage rates and home prices. Here you can see on the mortgage side, which is measured on the right axis, when mortgage rates go up, median home prices drop. When mortgage rates drop, median prices go up. And most recently, this big increase, historic increase in the mortgage rate has reduced home prices, except for most recently, over the last 6 months, they've increased. Never happened before, and because something else that has never happened before is going on, and that is people don't want to sell their homes when they're sitting on a sweetheart mortgage rate of 3% or less. And to see that, just look at this. In terms of the percentage of outstanding mortgages, 27% are under 2.9%, 40% 3 to 3.9, and 14 under 5, between 4 and 5%. That's 80% total, but just in the below 4%, you're talking about 2/3 of those people holding mortgages. There's value to that. That's an asset, a financial asset, almost like owning stock. Let's look at what that value is. If you are paying 2.8% on your mortgage and you got in just at the right time and you got the 2.8, the P&I payment on a median price home, which is about $1 million in Orange County, $200,000, you have to finance $800,000. The payments, P&I would be $3,300 a month. If it's 7%, it's $5,300. What is that difference worth? Well, over 30 years, just in interest, not principal, just in interest, you will be paying over the 30 years, $733,000. That's over 30 years. You have to discount that back to the present to get a present value. Discounting at 4%, $474,000. That asset is worth roughly $500,000. I was talking yesterday with Jonathan Lansner of the Orange County Register, and he told me that he was talking to some attorneys. The value of this has become trade bait in divorce cases. In other words, if you get divorced, who owns this beautiful, sweet-out mortgage that's worth $500,000? That's now being tabulated in divorce cases. Okay, I'll have more to say about this when we get to Orange County, but now I'd like to introduce a colleague. This is his team, except for Henrik Cronqvist here. This is his team that competed in the CFA Institute Research Challenge that won the regional championship. This is the 7th year out of 8 years running. And the young man in front of Fidel, by the way, is his son Jeremiah. That's where Fidel gets all of his investment advice. And I will take some of the credit because Kate Miller, to the left there of Fidel, and Katya Ivano, and Brian Limberopoulos were all in my econometrics class the last year. So I'll take some of the credit, but I'll leave some of the credit for our next speaker, Fidel Lawandi. Fidel?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Actually, interestingly enough, the 1 year that we lost was because Jeremiah wasn't with us. The other 7 years, he was there for the competition, and every year that he was with us, we won. So this year, we're making sure that he shows up on February 16th because the competition actually lies on my 50th birthday, and the last thing that my team wants to do is to lose on my birthday. No pressure. Some of them are sitting here. Actually, right there. All right. So hopefully I have some better news for you compared to what we've heard so far. But most recently in the investment community, lost a giant, Charlie Munger, who's the lifetime partner in Berkshire Hathaway with Warren Buffett. And while a lot of people, when you ask them their favorite quote, when it comes to investments, they typically will quote one of Warren Buffett's. Actually, Charlie is my man, because this is my favorite quote, and it's actually a Charlie quote. And I'll paraphrase it for you. Simply stated, it argues that if you, as an investor, are indifferent about losing about 50% of your invested assets, about 3 to 4 times in a century, then you shouldn't own stocks. More importantly, if you decide to own stocks, then you deserve the mediocre return. In other words, that when you're investing in companies, you pick good companies, and you're a long-time investor. If you're going to try to time the market, odds are you're not going to get the returns that you deserve. And we saw that this year. So if we look at this year, investors that are passive investors, in other words, they're investing, let's say, in an ETF that spans the entire S&P 500, as of today, you're about 21, 22% up, mostly driven by 7 companies, but you're up about 21%. Now, if you were a stock picker and you didn't pick one of those top 7, odds are you're hovering around 5% for the year. Just to put it in perspective, that's around what you would get as a yield on the 3 months treasury. So really not a great performance. Now, moving forward into 2024, we have some things working for us that we should have actually a good year in the stock market. One, the momentum that we're seeing through 2023, so that momentum is going to continue to push through 2024, mostly driven by the AI kind of bubble. But thankfully, unlike the dot-com bubble, the AI bubble is happening in well-established companies, as you could see, NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, Tesla, and Google. So even if they don't really achieve much in the next year, they're still well-established companies, and as long as you're a long-time investor, it's going to be fine. The second momentum in pushing the market forward next year is interest rates. And the Fed gave a present to the market yesterday when they openly admitted that there's a good chance that we're going to see about 3 rate cuts next year. I'm a little bit skeptical, but I'll take them at their word. And if that occurs, we're going to see that the market momentum will continue. We're going to start seeing some big spikes, just like the spike that we saw yesterday. Now, another thing, next year is an election year, and typically in an election year, on average, and here, we go back to 1960, every single election, and notice that every single election year, with the exception of the dot-com bubble burst and the Great Recession and the housing bubble, every year has been what? A positive year. And on average, it's about 10%. So we have that going for us. Now, what do we have that is kind of taken away or could push back? 2 things. The 2 things that are going to push back or are going to kind of hold us back is if we end up, 1, with bad economic data or unfavorable economic data, and if we end up with earning numbers that are not attractive. So the market is betting on good earnings numbers, good economic data, and being where the Fed like to see inflation around 2% by mid-next year. So any of that changing, you'll see a lot of volatility in the market, a lot of movement up and down. So if you don't want that headache, typically an ETF or a passive investment, and you just ride it along. But if you are a long-time investor, these volatility days are going to be great days for you to identify great companies that you buy them and hold on to them for the long run. But be prepared to lose possibly losing 50% of your money 3-4 times in 100 years. All right? Now, if we turn our attention to the world of real estate, it's a whole different story. And before we jump into the data, I want to shout out to Green Street. We have a couple of our students going to be going to work there. We have plenty of us students there, and the shout out to Green Street is because not only do they hire a lot of our superstars from our undergraduate real estate class, but also whenever I reach out for them for data for our economic forecast, they're always kind to share that with us at no cost. And if we start looking at the real estate side of things, commercial real estate, housing, Jim does a great job on that, the news is not too great. So we'll start off with industrial, because industrial, kind of a more comfortable, not too bad of a news. We're in good shape. We're just seeing some kind of slowdown, which is expected, because remember, warehousing has been doing what for the past few years? It's been skyrocketing, right? So we're starting to see some stabilization, some slowdown, some saturation in the market. So we're seeing that when it comes to growth in rent and occupancy, it's kind of stalling. Nothing too crazy. It's kind of stalling. We see that the cap rates, which is the valuation or what we use to value, and for those that are not familiar, high cap rates means low value, low cap rates means high value. So you see that cap rates have jumped, and they even have jumped since our last update back in June, and we're hovering around the 4% for LA, Orange County, and the Inland Empire. But notice that Orange County kind of starting to stray away from the pack with higher cap rates compared to the Inland Empire and LA. They were all kind of together back in June. Now Orange County is starting to see higher cap rates, which means that we're experiencing what? Lower valuations. We're starting to see valuations dropping a little bit more than what we would like them to be compared to the Inland Empire and LA. San Francisco, it's just San Francisco. It's the yellow line. They're above even the country's average number. So when it comes to industrial, we're okay. We're seeing some slowdown. I don't foresee any more inventory coming to market outside of the projects that we have right now, and we should be in good shape as it relates to that. Now, office, on the other hand, there's just no fix to it right now, and that's unfortunate. You see the numbers here. This is negative 13 in San Francisco right now. So this indication, the market revenue per available footage, typically combines the quality of occupancy and rent growth. So the higher the number, the better off you are. So you want a positive number, big number. Big number, but with a negative next to it. 13%. You see Orange County and LA, they're hovering slightly under the weighted average of the entire US market. When you see cap rates, it's just straight lines. And while San Francisco seems to have a slightly lower cap rate, San Francisco has the highest jump in cap rate in a very, very short period of time. Now, for those of us that have been around for a long time, the fact that we're talking about industrial at a cap rate of around 4%, and we're talking about office at a cap rate around 10% seems upside down. But that explains, or that kind of identifies the fact of how big of a problem we have in office. And it's going to continue to exacerbate itself with no fix in sight until we figure out what to do with those extra square footage. Now, apartment buildings are the interesting ones. And they're interesting because, as you could see, we're starting to kind of get to zero growth. Thankfully, in Orange County, we're still having some momentum as it relates to rent increases and occupancy. So Orange County, we're still good. But when you look at LA and San Francisco, nothing. It's died off. And as you could see, the cap rates have jumped significantly. And again, there is San Francisco kind of leading the pack on the biggest jump. Well, why are we seeing this? In multifamily, it's a more unique situation. Why? Back in the days when we buy multifamily apartment buildings, you buy an apartment building, you get a 30-year fixed rate interest mortgage on it, and you hold on to it forever. The last 5 years, you go out, you buy an apartment building, you get a variable interest rate. That means your interest rate changes with the hopes that you give the apartment building a facelift, kick out the tenants that you have, increase the rent, and sell it for a higher price than what you bought it for. The problem is the market is stalling, the valuation is not there because the cap rates have jumped, and your variable rate mortgage is coming up for an adjustment. Or it's maturing because it's a short-term loan instead of the 30-year loan, and now you got to get a mortgage where if you had 3%, the lowest, I was talking to a chief banking officer yesterday, the lowest mortgage that they're writing a multifamily variable interest rate is 7%. So to kind of put it in perspective for anybody that doesn't have a multifamily, imagine if your mortgage interest rate goes from 3% to 7% overnight. How much jump of that payment is going to be? And that's what the multifamily market kind of bubbling right now. So I would say that you're going to see a lot of properties that are coming on the market because people just want to get rid of them. And for those that have the dry powder and have the ability to identify the good deals, next year or two are going to be a great opportunity to identify really great deals in the multifamily industry kind of part of the real estate market and kind of take advantage of that. All right? So I hope it's better than what we heard from Jim and Ramon of all bad news. This is a little bit better. But with that, I will turn it over to Jim for the Orange County forecast.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Well, I cannot say a whole lot of good things about Sacramento and our governor. I can say many good things about our beautiful city of Orange. And I want to express appreciation to our mayor, who graces us with his presence, Mayor Dan Slater. Thank you for joining us. And if you want a delightful place to go to dinner, please head out to Orange Plaza, and the social capital of Southern California. Again, thanks, Dan. Well, Orange County, what's going on here? The sad news is that payroll employment is pretty much following California. You'll see that the population decline we've experienced in California in percentage terms is pretty much like what the county is also experiencing. You could see a comparison, they're pretty close. But I have some good news for Orange County, and that is if you take the 2019 job count and compare it to 24, we are now finally over the pre-COVID recession high in 2019. Took a while, but we're there with 50,000 more jobs than we had on average in 2019. That growth was focused, by the way, in two job sectors: professional and business, education and health, which comprise something like 80,000 of an increase, which means that if you take these two out, the rest of the sectors, on balance, actually have fewer workers still than 2019. So this is where the action is. I'm going to say a little bit more about City of Hope in terms of health, but the jobs they're generating at City of Hope in the next few years, they're going to be going up from 500 to 1,000 workers. That's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of its impact. Okay, just as we looked at California for something very important, advanced jobs, that's where the action is, 2 to 3 times the wages over the overall county average. Comparing San Diego to Orange County, and I've done this before, but I have a bit of new information that sheds some light on why. And that is, back in 2005, Orange County had 23,000 more advanced jobs, high-paying jobs in the tech sectors than San Diego. And by 23, San Diego had 17,000 more. We had 17,000 fewer. That's a swing of 40,000 jobs. If you multiply that by the wage rates, San Diego experienced $6 billion more in terms of salaries paid out than Orange County. What's happening? What explains that? Well, to do that, you have to look at the 4-digit job classifications, and when you do that, you'll find that in aerospace, San Diego's growing far more rapidly than Orange County. We didn't experience any growth between 5 and 23, pretty much zero, 300. Then in navigation, we actually lost jobs over that period. I guess a lot of them went to San Diego, but there you had 8,700. But now I have a bit of good news finally. I think it's pretty good news, and that is that there's one area where Orange County is outperforming San Diego, and actually the rest of the nation, and that is in medical equipment, medical supplies, medical devices. We grew by almost 10,000 jobs versus the 2,000 in San Diego. But the thing that's really amazing, remember I mentioned that we track 50 different MSAs throughout the nation, all over the nation, and you rank those not by the percentage of jobs, but the total number of jobs in job classification 3391, medical devices. We are number one in the nation, number one of those 50 different MSAs. Boston, Minneapolis tied number 2 at 18,000. Well, this is where companies like, first of all, Edwards Life Sciences and the incredible things that they're doing. They're a platinum sponsor, but they are now in clinical trials in developing an aortic stenosis valve, which is a cardiac problem that needs to be dealt with. And here, Edwards is at the forefront, right in our backyard, of developing a product to deal with that serious heart ailment. City of Hope, our title sponsor, in addition to providing all this incredible care, treatment, for cancer patients, it also is working with 1,000 scientists around the nation. It's also obviously a hotbed for using different kinds of medical devices, and its development is the kind of thing that will help propel our county. One other thing that needs to be done is, and I think probably the most important thing to keep that stellar position as number one, and that is link what we're doing in higher education with that sector, especially in engineering schools. And we're doing that with the Fowler School. Fowler School collaborations with corporations like Edwards, like Massimo and others, Octane, also encouraging the faculty to work with their students in developing medical devices. We've already established 2 startup firms. I hope Danielle Chapman has a piece of the action on those companies and the more companies to follow in that area. And our coursework. We have coursework embedded in the curriculum relating to medical devices, including even a course in biomedical engineering and medical devices. And that has to be done not just at Chapman, Cal State Fullerton, UCI, to keep the strength in medical devices going. Okay, total residential building permits. When you look at total permits, they're around 7,000 a year, and pretty much flat. And those who might think, just like in California, that that's going to increase substantially when lower mortgage rates come to pass, again, I think this may be a high watermark. Because when you look at population of Orange County since 2018 has dropped by 50,000. It's about the same percentage drop in California. Remember that calculation I did before? If you take 50,000 and you divide it by the average number of people per housing unit in Orange County, which is, by the way, 2.83, do the math, turns out to be roughly 15,000 homes have been vacated, 15,000 homes. And that's roughly 2 years' supply. That's additional supply where you don't need to have new homes to deal with the demand for housing. By the way, this is a true story. Ramon Sphere told me this happened. He lives in Anaheim Hills. And he told me a true story. He said the home next to him is a vacant home, one of these homes that maybe somebody moved out of. And the owner checks up on this home, goes by every week to just check the home and make sure everything's okay. And recently, he went there and the lights were on inside the house. And he saw a silhouette of a guy walking around inside the house. So he calls the police. The police come out, raise the guns, go in the house. And they walk in and they say, "Charlie, is that you again? We told you you're not supposed to do that. Enter somebody's house and live there. So pack up your bags, clothes, all that, get out of here." Charlie walks out. The owner asks the police, "Well, aren't you going to charge him with something, or he gets a ticket or something?" He said, "No, the courts aren't doing anything about it. They're just letting these people, live there until somebody like the police come in." Well, I say this because if you have or own a vacant home, be on the watch for Charlie, because I'm sure he's looking for a place right now. There's something else besides population. We've talked about the population drop in California, Orange County. We talked about high taxes. There's actually something else that we haven't been able to measure well, and that is business regulation. We did a survey of CEOs, and it turns out the number one reason they cite is not high taxes, but regulation. We can't measure that well because we don't have a good measure for regulation. Yesterday, in our Argyros College of Business and Economics, we had one of the nation's leading economists, Charlie Canomaris, who came here to talk about a measure that he and his team have developed on measuring regulation at the zip code level. It's incredible. And we're looking forward to partnering with him in the future in terms of measuring the impact of regulation on economic growth. Charlie, are you in the audience? Why don't you stand up? Leading economist, and one of the leading economists in the nation. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, we had Fidel, we're nearing the end. We had Fidel talk about cap rates, but I'm going to be a little more specific in terms of how apartment prices, because I know many of you out there invest in apartment buildings, and I know on the whole, in the long run, you've done very well. The question is, do you put in more money? Here's a comparison between the 10-year bond and apartment cap rate. Apartment cap rate, if you don't know, is the rate of return on apartments. The return's in the numerator, the denominator is the price. So that's your rate of return on investing in apartments. And the usual spread, historically, if you go actually back to 1980, the spread is on average around 300 basis points. In other words, 3 percentage points difference to pay you back for the added risk of investing in an apartment building rather than the safe and secure 10-year bond, which you could sit back and be a coupon clipper, if you will. But that's narrowed recently. Instead of a 300 basis point spread, it's like 100 basis points because 10-year bond has increased, but the apartment cap rate has only increased a little bit. We don't see interest rates dropping in the near future, so they're going to stay around that high level, which means that the apartment cap rate over time has to go up 300 basis point difference to provide enough of an incentive for investors to invest in an apartment building. That's a cap rate of 7 versus 4 on the 10-year bond rate. Well, how do you get to 7? You could do it by increasing rents. Recently, rents have been decreasing because of population drop. You could reduce the vacancy rate. Recently, that's been increasing because of mainly reduction in population. The only thing left is apartment building prices have to drop. And to go from basically 5.5% to 7%, that would call for a drop in prices of 15%, minimum of 15% over the next couple of years. Okay, I know we're nearing the end. This is right near maybe mile 10 and the Napa Marathon, which is another nice thing about that. You get wine at the end. And I know we're going to have wine at the reception. But before we do that, I want to talk about who our next president is going to be. And we'll conclude with that. A colleague of mine, Dr. Tom Campbell, fellow University of Chicago grad. We've been working on a model. It's just been published in the Social Science Research Network in the Future, a journal. If you're interested in seeing the details, email me and I'll get you the link to that article. But it's been a joy working with Tom. I met Tom Campbell when we were in the state Economic Advisory Council together, and at the time he was dean of the Haas School of Business. And I worked him over. I tried to get him to Chapman. I finally succeeded. He came as our dean of our Fowler School of Law, did a great job. And now, joined the faculty, and now we're doing research together. Great experience. Tom Campbell, are you there? Please stand up and receive our recognition. It's really... as a joint appointment in law school and our Argyros College of Business. So who are we saying that will be the next president? Will it be Joe Biden? Or on the Republican side, would it be Trump, maybe DeSantis, Haley? My personal favorite is Alfred E. Newman. Now, if you're a Generation Zer, you're not going to know who that. I found that out last night in my econometrics class. So how many of you know Alfred E. Newman? Out of a class of 40? 2 vaguely knew who he might be. Now, those of you who might be running in the 75 to 80 category with me in Napa, you will know that, of course, he was Mad Magazine, and he was their mascot. Anyway, we don't care about who's running, right, Tom? All we care about, and all our model takes into account, is economic variables. Like James Carville said during the election with Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush, when he said, basically, it's the economy, stupid. We have only two economic variables, and explains most of the variation in who people vote for. And that's shown here. No, that's a chart, an eye chart right there. Difficult to see, but let me summarize. We found that the aggregate inflation from 9 months before the election to the election, is the most important inflation variable, aggregate job growth from 21 months before the election to the election, are the 2 most important variables determining what the spread in popular vote percentage would be between the incumbent party and the non-incumbent party. And you can see this model. You can't see it here, but let me just show you. This is the actual spread in terms of the election results. So just for example, here in 56, that was Adlai Stevenson running against Dwight Eisenhower. You know, people would say, of course, who's going to... Ike, everybody loved Ike, commander of the Allied forces during World War II, running against a little-known, widely perceived egghead governor of Illinois. Of course he's going to win big. Turns out, all you have to do is put in job growth and inflation over the periods I mentioned, and you get, here's the forecast that we have, almost exactly. So even the big ones, like 84, that was the Reagan win over Mondale. Got it right there. And the close elections, very close as well. So it's correctly called 15 of the last 17 elections. So the question is, what are we forecasting for 24? So I will announce that now, and if we have a drum roll. I thought, we're here in the Musco Center, Maribel. You and Paul made sure that we had the best acoustics right here, right? And here you're hearing me spout off rather than hearing great music. Can we have one of our percussionists come out and give us an actual drum roll, not a fake one? Ian, please give a hand for Ian McFarland. Ian hails from Fresno. He's a music performance major. He's an RA, and I understand a percussionist extraordinaire. So, Ian, could we have a drum roll, please? And the next party to win, not a name, the next party will be the incumbent Democratic Party with a plurality of 7.7%. That is what you call a deafening silence. Well, I don't want you, those of you who are Biden supporters, Democratic supporters, I've given you some good cheer at the end of a rather gloomy forecast. But some others might not be so happy, so I want to leave some good cheer for you as well. Because here's the power of our model. We've already baked in about half of the job growth because of 21 months. We're already through 12 months. But what's going to happen next year? We're putting in our Chapman forecast for job growth and inflation, important, but maybe different. The beauty of our model is we could simulate what goes on, so and we will revise our forecast as we get nearer to the election. But if we do have an average size recession and the higher inflation that goes with that and the lower job growth, then the tables are turned and it leads to a loss for the incumbent party of minus 2.8%. That's, by the way, we're forecasting popular, not electoral votes. But if the Democrats lose by 2.8%, if there is an average recession, that's because of complications politically that I can't get into. That would be enough because popular vote favors the Democratic Party, but electoral vote favors the Republican. That would pretty much ensure a Republican victory if that were to happen. So stay tuned. If you're interested in the paper, please let me know and we'll give you the link to that. And now I'd like to end our forecast by the best student response for student evaluation. I have to give you a little background information. First of all, there is something called, if you go to Orange Sushi on Tustin Avenue, believe me, best sushi place in Orange County or the world. I don't know, it's just fantastic. Great prices too. But they have something called the Doti roll. And it happened because I was there and I made some suggestions. Could you put some cilantro in, maybe jalapeno pepper? And they did, and was selling. I said, you call that a Doti roll? That's my invention. So they did. So there's a Doti roll. And right kitty corner from that, best donut shop is the Donut Hub. And they have something for the same reason called a Doti donut. So put some coconut, a little bit more caramel on the top, and that became a Doti donut. Okay, I bring to my econometrics class to make the science of econometrics, you could imagine what that class is like, a little more palatable by bringing in Doti donuts and Doti rolls. So you have to understand that in understanding the response, the best response on the student evaluation. So Ian, since you're out here, could we have another drum roll, please? I told you he was a percussionist extraordinaire. This is a future Gene Krupa. Fantastic, Ian. Made us proud. Thank you. So now what's the best response? I like the Doti donut better than the Doti roll. Here, you know, as a teacher, you want to get something like, I love the preparations. Examples are terrific. You're always enthusiastic. He's always available to see me. I get this. But you know what? You're going to get it too, because in the reception to follow, not only will there be wine like the Napa Half Marathon, but in addition, we will be serving Doti rolls, Doti donuts, and you could tell me personally which one you like better. And we will have wine to accompany it. And from personal experience, there's nothing better than a nice glass of wine with a Doti donut. It's a great It's an absolutely great pairing, and you have a chance to experience it. I'm sorry the 4,000 in the World Wide Web virtually with us. You're going to have to use your imagination to see what that tastes like. Anyway, we invite you to that reception, and I want to again express my appreciation to all of you. And Rick, the greatest honor that can be given a faculty member is to hold an endowed chair, and to hold it with the Muth name is just absolutely incredible. They surprised me with this. I did not know this was happening. I want to tell you that just one personal story. We've been doing this now for 46 years, and the third forecast conference, Rick Muth was my MBA student. And his paper was so good. It was how he could use the Chapman forecast to forecast block sales when he was still working under his dad. It was a great paper. I had him present it at our forecast. He's the only student presenter in the 46-year history of the forecast. And now to have the honor of bearing your name is just a true joy. So thank you very much. And I want to thank our staff, Dorothy Farrell, Lori Nace, Trudy Ing, our students, and our sponsors. Thank you, Annette Walker. Thank you for your great leadership that you're providing City of Hope, and all of our sponsors and Edwards Life Sciences as well. And I'd like to wish you, on behalf of the A. Gary Anderson Center for Economic Research, happy holiday, Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah, and we wish you all a happy, healthy, and prosperous New Year. I'll see you outside in the Aiken Plaza.